Welcome to the Joy Work Show, the podcast that goes beyond the surface of business, right to the heart, to explore the real joy and the stories behind success, not just the moments of celebration, but the challenges that pave the way for them. Hiya, I'm Diane, and we know on this podcast that joy isn't just about the good times. Often the greatest joy comes right after the greatest challenge. Today, I'm sitting down and chatting with Rebecca, a coach and mentor who helps women build businesses that align with their lives, not take over them. Her journey started in teaching, but like so many of us, motherhood and life and ambition shifted her priorities and led her to discover coaching, where she now supports other women in navigating the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. In this episode, we get real about the struggles of content creation, something I find boring and Rebecca loves, the pressure to niche down, and even if we should, and why authenticity is everything in business. She might actually hate me saying the word authenticity, so I will say being yourself in business. Rebecca shares her thoughts on vulnerability, when to lean into it and when to set boundaries. And we also talk about creativity, ambition, and the delicate balance of work and life. If you've ever questioned your path, felt overwhelmed by the noise of online business, or wondered how to make entrepreneurship actually work for you, then this episode has come at exactly the right time. But as always, it's so much better when you hear it from the guests themselves. So let's go. Hi, Rebecca, and welcome to the Joy Work Show. I'm so delighted for you to join me today. We have just recently, in the last month or so, met, and we had kindred spirits, I think, were how we felt straight away. So it was only essential that we got you on the podcast. So for everyone who hasn't met you yet, who are you, what do you do, and how did you get here?
So, I am Rebecca Cracknell, and I am a coach, a mentor, and a teacher. And as you discovered when we met in person, I really hate pinning that down. But I essentially work with women who are building businesses that will change their lives. And I think the reason that I do that and the how I got here part is because that's what my business has been for me. So I used to be an English teacher. I essentially walked out of university and into a classroom and started teaching, and was there until I had children, and then realised, oh goodness, like I don't think this work works for me and my family. And then I was a little bit of a stay-at-home mum for a while, which was a big job. And off the back of that, I had that itch for something more. And I think that's where that phrase, the businesses that will change their lives, kind of comes in, because that's what my work does for me.
I love that. It's the one thing that always interests me and it's all been women guests so far on the podcast. And the one thing that comes in is the catalyst. That is the decision from the change of being in the career, being a staying at home mum, or the catalyst of thinking, right, I want to now do things differently. And what does that differently look like? And the conversation is so often that the catalyst is children. Now, what's interesting for you is it sounds like it came a little bit later than like babies, and also that you went stay at home and
Yeah,
then decided.
so I guess when people ask me how I left teaching, which is something people ask me a lot, because I think teachers feel, possibly rightly so, quite institutionalized, and the idea of coming out of that profession. My husband, he's a head teacher, so all of my family are teachers, but that's another story for another.
That's a whole nother podcast.
But that idea of coming out of that profession feels huge. And I think I did it incrementally. So I had my daughter in 2012 and I went part-time. And then I had my middle son in 2015 and I went even more part-time. And then I had my youngest son in 2018. And at that point, I was barely in the building, but I hadn't quite been able to break free. And part of that was fear of like, what the fuck else can I do? Part of that was I felt very valued in school and they wanted me to stay there. And I think that combination meant that I sort of clung to something that I knew deep down inside wasn't right for me anymore. So it wasn't babies as such that kind of changed that, although I think it definitely shifted something inside me. And I had that thing of, am I giving my kids my best or am I giving somebody else's kids my best? And I think the answer was probably I was giving nobody my best. But they were slightly older. My youngest was sort of 18 months when COVID hit. And by that point, I was on a 0 hours contract with school, literally working the middle bits of the day. And that felt like something that enabled me to let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's when I have conversations with teachers or people that have been in an institution, and I'm from the private sector, so I don't fully understand it, but it's that thing. It does take a lot to break free from that institution and the fact that you are institutionalized. And I know myself, people who are so scared because they are so institutionalized. So, what do you think it was in you that was just that point that needing to jump and getting rid of that fear? Was it just that it got that bad, or was it a
No.
strength in you?
No, it wasn't that. I think the reality is, whilst I was an excellent teacher and I still use my teaching a lot in the work that I do now, and actually at the minute I'm kind of craving it a little bit more as well. But that's again maybe another story for another day. It was that I had fallen into being a teacher and I'd kind of tried to escape a number of times in a number of different ways. And that wasn't because I didn't love it, but it was that teaching was very safe for me. And I don't know if I felt safe enough to do some of or all of the things that kind of lived inside my head. And when I found myself running a business, I had a friend and she was like, yeah, you always wanted to do that. You used to talk about it all the time. And I was like, did I? But I think the way I saw myself after I became a parent gave me some of that confidence to take a leap that I maybe wasn't ready to do
Yeah.
before then.
And it is that thing because I have friends who are teachers, and I've had them say to me, we don't, even before I was doing this, when I was in my career, and like, we don't know how you do what you do, and you get up and speak in front of lots of people every day, and you run these sales and marketing targets, and you work all of the hours and all of that. We don't know how you do what you do. And I'm like, you don't know how you get up in front of, I mean, these particular teachers are high school teachers.
Yeah,
And I'm
that's
like,
what I was
you
saying.
get up in front of teenagers. There's nothing more terrifying than a teenager. And you think what I do is, I said, I've got some 18 and 19-year-olds work for me, and they're the most terrifying of all the people that work for me. You know, me standing in front of them. So I don't know how you do it. And I think, you know, going back to you saying about having that teaching bug, so I'm not going to let you away and say that's for another podcast. It's, I see teachers with so many transferable skills and the way that they can manage situations, communicate with people at different stages in life, make a subject interesting and understandable, you know, and, you know, because it's, I just think teachers have so many skills that they can give that they don't see that they have because they are so institutionalized and they think that the only thing that they can do is be teachers because like you so many people go into it straight from university, straight from training, and there is so many transferable skills. Do you now really see that? And obviously in the online space, there's lots of ex-teachers, there's lots of ex-NHS, there's lots of ex-forces, because, and this is a whole nother podcast probably, disillusioned people with sectors that I think even people who aren't in the sectors know that they're not working as they should. And as much as they're not looking after the people that need the sectors, they're also not looking after people that are working in those sectors. So you see lots of people in the online space with those backgrounds. There is those transferable skills, isn't there? You can take them into the business world and make the business world better with them.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest lesson that I had to learn. When I first started out, I again sort of accidentally found myself running a business. I started doing some tutoring work, and then people who saw what I was capable of said, "Oh, would you do this for me? Would you just create some content for me? Would you write this course for me?" And all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, I'm like writing for a living." And I started out my business creating content for people. I used to write blogs for £15, which blows my mind.
Which now you're like, why did I ever let myself do that? But it's all learning, it's all the journey, it's all the
Yeah.
growth.
And it was that idea that I did not see any of the skills that I had in the classroom as valuable. And I didn't have that belief that they were transferable. And I thought, oh, I can teach Shakespeare to some 16-year-olds and, do really well at that. But who needs that? And tutoring kind of worked for me a degree. And like, I do really love working with young people as well. But for my family, that didn't tick all the boxes. So when I found myself sort of accidentally running a business, I definitely played down my strengths. And I think what I found hard was I'd never even worked in a business. Somebody had always done like my pay, somebody had always like done everything, apart from the fact that I was also doing everything. So when I then was running a business, I found that I was helping people with more than just creating their content. And like I've really struggled to niche. And the whole internet will tell you need to niche. And I'm like, I can't niche. And I've kind of landed on the idea that I maybe I'm the niche, and that's fine. Actually, I think as I've got confident and comfortable with that being the case, I've seen that that's actually really beneficial as well. But I was a bit of a generalist, and so I sort of still am when I work with a client. So kind of I'm thinking of client conversations I've had today. We've had conversations around pricing, we've had conversations about content, we've had conversations around boundaries, like all of that stuff comes under it because when I was doing what I was doing, that came naturally to me. There wasn't like a cut off at the classroom door of like, oh, you can't help me with that. Like I was literally doing it all. And so those transferable skills, like you say, about being good communicators, about being able to like take something complex and make it simple for somebody, being able to kind of get people motivated and focused enough to work towards their own goals, like they are all transferable skills. But I think when I started my business, I found it very hard to see value in them.
It's so interesting to me because when I watch and like you said, even when you went into tutoring, it doesn't work for the family. And I think when you're younger and you look at teachers and you think, well, yeah, teachers would be a great job to have when you have kids, and because you only work till 3 or 3, and then you have your own children, then you see your friends who are teachers try and make it work, and it's the hardest thing in the world. So when I was in, obviously I've now got my own business, so I have the flexibility. It's exactly why I started my business in the first place. But when I was in the private sector, there was still that flexibility to a certain extent. I could still say, I need to be here. I left the private sector quite soon after having my children, so I didn't have as much, I couldn't deal with the guilt. But there, I still had that flexibility of saying, I need to be here at that time. I have a hospital appointment. I need to go and do this. I mean, even sometimes it was like, because I worked like 80 hours a week, sometimes I was like, I need to go and get my hair done. So I need to leave. And me leaving early was me leaving at 5, believe it or not, which is ridiculous when I look back at it now. But I would like, I need to leave at 5 because the latest hair appointment I can get is 6:30, and it's going to take me that amount of time to get there, blah, 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 blah. But I still had that flexibility and that choice of, and then if there was things that came up in my life, there was always a workaround. There was always the support there to have a workaround. But in teaching, you don't have that. It's like, even when you have your children, it's like, well, and one of my friends said that they phoned in and said, one of my children's not well and I need to be the one to stay at home today. And they were like, well, you can't. Can your partner not do it? You need to come in. I'm like, you work with children. You're meant to be looking after the children, and that is the attitude you have. I mean, it is impossible.
I think it's very hard, and it is that idea, like you say, of kind of in other jobs, not all other jobs, but in
No.
a lot of other jobs, when I can't come in because I'm sick, like my work stays over there and I'll crack on with that on another day. When you're doing that work, you don't go in because you're sick, or if your child's sick, somebody else is picking that up. And there's so much, and I think this is maybe kind of what you're alluding to with like the
Yeah.
toxic nature of the work. There's so much that is not flexible. And like I say, my husband is still very much in school, and he's a head teacher, and like, don't get me wrong, it's lovely when he's around in the holidays and I'm like, yay, finally I can work. He never does school run. Not because he doesn't want to, he'd love to be there. I mean, I don't
But
think
you physically can.
but he physically can't. And he is often, not getting in till 9 o'clock at night or whatever because he's been doing all the meetings after school. And so I think the perception of what that career is and what that career can give you is very different. And I also there's something in there as well. And I appreciate we're here and we're going to talk lots about joy, right? About the idea of it being a vocation, and a
Yeah.
vocation is all about the fulfillment, and you don't need to be compensated financially in a way, because you've got that fulfillment and
Yeah.
you're like changing
You're
lives.
doing it for the greater good.
Yeah, and you're doing it for the greater good, and I think that breeds a sort of belief that it has to be one or the other. And again, when I kind of made that leap and started running my business, it blew my mind that I could like go to a networking thing, hang out with some incredible people, have a nice lunch, have a like wear what I wanted, and like call it work. And I loved it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm going to a networking event tomorrow and I'm going to get to go on the train into London. Oh, this is exciting. Like, can like manage my own time. And the fact that I also got to decide what I would be paid for that felt really tough. And it felt like I can't have both. I had to do a lot of work around my value and being worthy and being good enough to have both, and not having to pick or choose.
And it must be such a difficult transition because, like you say, it is a broken system in terms of what people get paid and what they should get paid when they're literally helping us bring our children up. I don't agree that teachers are bringing children up.
No,
I think some parents treat it like that, but I
yeah,
would like to think I'm working with the parents to do it.
yeah,
Sorry, with the teachers to do that. Definitely the type of parent I will be when they go to school. But it's that you don't get into it for the money, but that doesn't mean that you don't shouldn't be compensated fairly and in line with your expertise and your value. And that's something that I think's so disheartening about it, because like I didn't get into my previous career for the greater good. I get into it for money, and I get into it because I was heavily compensated for hitting targets and bonuses, and that's the type of business that I was in. So that's a completely different type of mindset from that. So I can imagine the leap that you must have had to take when you're starting your business. So you say that obviously a content, and we had a little chat about content just before we started. We do have a chat before we start recording, everybody. We are a so many people struggle with content. But the reason I'm bringing up content specifically now is I followed you for a little while before we met in person.
which
And
made my day, by the way, when
I
you
know,
told
because I think on that day when you told me,
me.
you were like, oh, should we follow each other on Instagram? And I was like, I already follow you. I can't remember how I came to follow, but I followed, I pressed the button myself. And what I got from your content was not wildly different from what you're telling me, because it was clear how you were helping people and how you were transforming people. So not that it was unclear, but the person that is talking now about the journey that she's going on and the struggles that she had, I just saw somebody that was like bossing it. That's what I saw. So I really love that you can get that across in your content. And now following you, I know you do much more vulnerable stories and things. I'm talking about when I first came across you. But that's really important as business owners, that we're able to convey all those different messages. So I just wanted to say that when I saw your content, I was like, this is somebody who kind of really knows herself and knows what she's doing.
I think for me, that's the role content plays for me, in that it is a tool to better know myself and to better know my business. And even when I was just helping people with content in like one of my vain attempts to really niche, that was something that was really important. I believe that yes, you can knock out sort of 3 posts a week that are a nice Canva graphic and a nice little caption that, but you're building a business that you love. Your content's your tool to really better understand what that means, to connect with people over that. And I love creating content. I know that for other people, it doesn't necessarily come that easy, but I think it kind of comes back to that idea, if you're bored creating it, how are people going to feel when
Yeah.
they consume it?
Yeah.
And actually, maybe you need to ask yourself some bigger questions around what that content might be, or be prepared to get more vulnerable with that content, or just kind of really ask yourself. And I kind of use this like one question when I help people with their content, of like, if you were sat with your ideal client and you had 30 seconds with them, what's the one thing that you'd tell them? What's that
Mm-hmm.
like mark you'd want to leave? And
Mm-hmm.
when you kind of start from there, of like, oh, this isn't just about like, does my graphic look good, or is that the best branded photo of me, or does my caption have a nice hook at the top? Like, content should be the point where you meet somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, like, that's what you took from my content, because that's very much true. Like, I
Uh-huh.
feel like I'm bossing it a lot of the time. I'm also somebody who is on a journey to better understand myself and to create a business that is growing and evolving and changing. And like, I really believe that your content is your tool for doing that
Mm-hmm.
as a like solo business owner. Maybe it's
Yeah.
different when you've got a brand that's got multiple people involved and how that looks. But actually, I think that connection is what people are craving when they go on online.
I think so too, and I think you can even see, like, I think businesses will go through evolutions, and even
Yeah.
if we're having this conversation in a few years' time and we've got brands and teams and everything else around us, you will still have seen that brand evolution that we have gone through to get to that place. And I think even when you look at the big brands now, they are trying to get back to that messaging, to that connection, and the ones that do it incredibly well are the ones that never really lost it and keep it, the ones like Nike that never really show their shoes,
Mm.
but you just know it's them. And if you have an affinity, like there's people who prefer to wear those trainers, the people who prefer to wear Adidas because of the affinity with the brands, and they are huge, and they're legacy businesses now. They've been going for such a long time, but they've always stuck to that story, and they stick with that story, and they might experiment and try things, and they might look back and go, well, that ad didn't really land well that time we did that, but then they'll, like, okay, so let's go back to what we know and what we're good at. And I think with content, I think people are so scared to get it wrong, and almost that like perfectionist thing. And we all have it. Like, I cringe, but the worst thing for me is I spell something wrong. That's like the worst thing. But still, I won't, if it's a reel, I'm not redoing the reel. I'll just be like, oh yeah, I've put a spelling mistake in that. Sorry. I hate it. I hate it as much as you do, guys. I'll try harder next time. But it's that constant strive for perfectionism, I think, in people's content, when ultimately that's not what their dream client wants.
No, and this is where, like, I honestly believe if you are building a business, you are on like a personal development journey, and you are going to face up to, at every like micro up level, the parts of yourself that you find challenging. And if perfectionism for you has kind of run the show, and I wrote about this in an email this week, like, who we're letting run our
Mm-hmm.
business, which parts of us are
Mm-hmm.
we letting run our business? Like, if perfectionism has always run the show for you, it's going to show up when you go to do something tough. If it is like the part of you that loves to be in control that is running the show, you're going to get challenged by that. And that isn't a bad thing. That's not, oh, perfectionist me or people pleasing me, they're bad. They can't be part of my business. But when you meet those kind of limiting beliefs, for want of a better phrase, like,
Yeah.
that's actually an invitation to ask some bigger questions, to do some growth, and to then kind of come out the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And content really is a tool that enables you to do that.
Uh-huh.
And I really love creating content.
Uh-huh. But it's that thing as well, like you say, you were an English teacher, you love the written word. And I think people think of content that it has to be glossy images, when actually you can really use the power of the word and power of language to actually convey and use and just have really simple
And I think as well,
imagery.
it's also knowing that, like, what works for one person. So I have a client and she's like, she makes the funniest reels. She's hilarious and they're brilliant and they are incredible. Like, I could never do what she does because
Yeah.
I'm not her, but I could write, an email or a caption that did something entirely different that is me.
Yeah.
And knowing that you don't have to do all the things, I think, is something that's quite freeing for people when they think about content, because they kind of, they listen to the rules. And I have a complicated relationship with rules, but they listen to the rules of, like, again, reels are going to get you loads of reach and you need to have a hook that does this, and don't forget that call to action. And when you're creating your strategy, make sure you've got content that does all of these different things. And people just go, whoa, that's a lot. Actually, if you do that thing of, what's that thing I would say to my ideal client if they were sat here with me for 30 seconds, the chances are you can do it really well.
Yeah.
You let all of those rules kind of get in your head, what you usually find you end up trying to do is do everything all at once. And when you do that, it never really works.
No, it never really works. And I think people do. And I think when they take those rules, and obviously people are telling us those rules because there are things that work. Like,
Yeah.
we know reels will get us more reach, but that doesn't mean that we have to churn them out every single day. We can have different content that has different purposes. And if reels aren't where you naturally sit, then you can find another way of doing it, or doing it in a different way and only using it once a week. Like, right, once a week, I'm just going to put it out there to find new people. The rest of the time, I'm going to look after the people I've got. Because I think people also forget that if you took their followers on any platform and put them in a room, they would be over the moon. They'd be like, look at all these people I get to speak to. But because it's this constant strive for more followers and more followers and more followers, which even when you listen to the Instagram gurus, they're telling you it doesn't really matter about followers anymore. It's all about your engagement. We would rather you had 10 followers and 9 engaged than 10,000 followers and 9 engaged.
Engaged,
You
yeah.
know, but it's just that thing of people understanding that, yes, you'll probably need to look at the themes you want your content to have. Yes, you need to understand that reels are for reach, and a single post probably isn't going to get you reach, but it will look after the people in your audience if you make it really valuable to them, and all the different things that you can do. But like you said, you don't have to do them all at once.
No, and I have a saying, and I used to say this in school, usually when kids would ask about punctuation, like, we learn the rules so that we can break them better. And when you, like, are looking at all of the things that you should be doing, what you should do with that information is go, okay, so what do I want to do with that?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's all about intention, always. And when you're building your business and you feel that kind of pull to be all of the things all at once, it always comes back to, what is my intention? What is, like, my purpose? What is my vision? What is it that I'm actually looking to create?
Mm-hmm.
And when you reconnect with that, you're able to kind of drown out that noise and know that you have the answers for you.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's just, I think people are just so scared to get it wrong, and ultimately you can't, unless you're going to go on and be abusive, you can't really. But hey, that's working for some people, so but you can't get it wrong. And also, when we're talking about Instagram Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, not so much. How long's it lasting? How long do people get to see it? It's literally is not even just yesterday's newspaper. It's literally like lunchtime's newspaper. You know, so we don't get too hung up. And I think people get too hung up on one post because they've also been fed this dream that one post is going to change their life and change their business. And ultimately that is not true at all. It's not even close.
No, and
Yeah.
I remember my first post that went viral, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is insane." I got not a single new follower from it, and I was like devastated. But it was a real lesson for me because I'd always kind of preached that idea of, like, don't chase vanity metrics, do what feels good for you. But the second it happened, I was like so fucking excited. I was like, it's finally happened. And it was kind of that check-in with
Yeah,
myself.
but we are human.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always telling my clients, I'll be telling them, like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I'm like, don't look at my social media today because, yeah, look at it tomorrow. You do your thing and I'll do mine, and look at it tomorrow and you'll see a much better example of what I'm trying to explain to you right now, because we are human. And it's always that thing, and you'll know, being a teacher, is that you can always teach, you always have the knowledge, you always understand, but we're not always implementing it in our own businesses because we're busy and we get caught up in all the same things that everybody else gets caught up in too. I want to go back to the niching thing because we are told by everybody about niching, and it's something that I've really struggled with as well. And as the Americans would say, the niches are in the niches. So, like, obviously, you've kind of made a decision that you're not chasing that anymore, and your niche is yourself and your uniqueness. And I am there because, like, obviously, I'm a strategist. I'm also a coach and mentor. We had a big conversation about what we called ourselves when we met and our struggles with that. But literally, you can't be in the online space and swing a cat without hitting another strategist. So, when I think about my niche, it is about my uniqueness. It is about my approach. It is about how I do things. So I have that thought. So what is your thoughts on niching? If somebody's listening to this and going, I'm struggling with it too. I'm really struggling with it and I'm struggling to niche down.
So I think niching makes life easier. If you are able to niche and like, so when I was just doing content, it felt a lot easier because I had one thing that I could talk about and it was very clear what that was. And so it gives you a way to make your messaging, to make like your offers, to make it all make sense, which is great, unless it isn't. And if it feels more like, that like 2000s bodycon dress that you're trying to squeeze into after you've had your kids, then it is not going to work for you because it's going to feel frustrating. You're going to feel like held back. You're going to feel restricted. And for me, like, that isn't fun. And I think all the things that you just said about the way that you work, that can be enough. And actually, if we're able to show up, whether that's like in our content or if, you're more like real world networking things, if you're able to show up as yourself or do the best attempt at showing up as yourself and are doing that effectively, because I have a complicated relationship with the word authentic as well, then people will recognize what you do. And kind of, I had that thing of, you can label it almost whatever you want, but actually the value isn't in the label. The value is in the work that you do. And if the work that you do, like the thought of doing, actually, the reason I became a teacher in the first place is the thought of doing the same thing every single day and just doing that bored me to fucking tears. And the only thing I knew that I wanted from a career was that it was varied.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought of only doing one thing with my clients, even if that looks slightly different in terms of how you do it,
Yeah.
actually, like, that doesn't bring me joy. That
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel trapped. And knowing that I can have all these varied conversations might make it harder to kind of sell the magic.
Yeah.
But I think people who see the magic and experience the magic aren't questioning, well, actually, why didn't you niche? They know the value in that.
I think that's it, and I think you like hit the nail on the head. It's like niching makes the messaging easier. So if you even need to do that to begin with, to get started, to get something out there, then that's ultimately the right path to go down. If it's literally stopping you from putting something out into the world, because procrastination is the killer of all businesses. So if it is that one thing that is stopping you, but for me, I think that if you are really strong on your mission of what you're trying to do, you know what the vision looks like, you can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can feel it, you know your values. Because the one thing that's very, very difficult, and I suppose that word that you said, showing up as your authentic self, but I think if you truly, truly know all of those things and you truly, truly know what you're trying to do, then you have the strength to really know who you're speaking to and really know who you want to speak to and knowing that dream. So I talk about ideal client and dream client.
Yeah.
And we want lots of ideal clients because there's never enough of the dream client to build the businesses that we want. So we want lots of ideal clients. But when we're using our messaging, we just want to talk to that dream client because the ideal clients will find us.
Mm.
The dream clients are the ones that we really want to, and they're the ones that feel good and are almost easy to work with because for me, they're ready to take action, they're ready to learn, and they're going to implement. I don't want somebody to come and work with me who'll take the information and be like, well, it didn't work for me. Diane didn't, whatever she told me didn't work, because they've not done the work to do it.
Yeah.
So, but I think the difficulty, if you don't have the strength of all of those things, of those foundations, then the one thing you have to have if you don't have a niche is to have boundaries, to kind of know, I am going to work with this person or I'm not going to work with this person, or I can. And also to have that thing of to say to somebody that if you go on, say you do discovery calls, for example, and you got on a discovery call with somebody and you probably could sell to them, but you know deep down that you're not the right person with them for whatever number of reasons, that you're able to say, I'm not the right person for you, whether you advise them to go and see somebody else or the type of person that they might need. And I think you need to have those boundaries when you've not got the niche of, I'm going to do 10 days worth of content for you, for example. When you're working with somebody on, right, let's look at your strategy. Let's look at how are we going to work through this. And I think those are the things that you need to be really clear on if you haven't specifically niched.
Yeah, and I would actually argue that those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to that idea that when you are building your business, you are learning about yourself. And you might learn that actually this is the one subsection that I'm really fucking good at and I want to do just this for the rest of ever. Or you might learn that actually, like, this is what I know about my boundaries.
Yeah.
And the answers don't come from you following some kind of like step-by-step guide. They come from asking really tough questions of yourself. And don't get me wrong, like I was literally on a call with my coach last week crying about the fact that I was like, well, what is it I do again?
Remind me.
How am I back here? And it feels like we have that, on repeat. But for me, that inability to kind of like pin that magic down sometimes feels really tough. It would feel much easier for me to say I do X and it just be one single thing. And I get frustrated with myself, but we kind of learn in spirals, I think. We come back to the same thing. And it might be that for me is the inability to niche, but that might also be like your boundaries. You might find yourself like with a really like great like ability to do certain things, yet if your client asks for something on a Friday night and you're like, oh no, yeah, I'll just do it for you over the weekend, and like if that's fine for you, that's fine, but if that is making you feel shit, then you've got to ask yourself about that boundary as well. And it could be any number of things, and what is fine for one person is not the standard. It
Mm-hmm.
again comes back to like know yourself, know what works for you, know what makes you feel good, know what brings you joy, know what drives you mental, like, but ask the tough questions to find
Mm-hmm.
that out.
Mm-hmm. So what does it look like when somebody comes to work with you just now?
So I work with people to begin with on that big vision. And I have a couple of offers that kind of all really start there of like, how do you want to change the world with your work? And what I find is people often don't really know the answer to that. And even if they have done work previously on like their vision or their mission, sometimes it still feels really small.
So I think people think that it's one and done. I
Yeah,
think they do it at the start. They don't do it in depth because who knows what when they
knows at
start.
the
Do you know
start.
what I mean? When I look back at what I wrote when I first started, it has, and I've only been going 19 months, it has changed threefold, since then. And I think they think it's that one and done when they don't realize it's until you are like corporate level brand,
Yeah,
it's a constant feast.
and I would argue that even then, like
Yeah.
your context is changing all the time. The world in which we live in is changing all the time. And your vision is going to shift and change. Your purpose is there all the time. And that doesn't mean it doesn't evolve because I don't think your purpose is fixed.
Hmm.
No, why you want to do the things you want to do is really powerful. And you kind of learn that again by asking those big questions of like, not just who am I as a business owner, but who am I as a partner? Who am I as a parent? Who am I as a friend? Who was I in that previous career? And like that common thread that exists inside you when you strip all those other things away. And it's like that question, and I often use this like as a journaling prompt both for myself and for other people too, of like, who are you when no one's watching? Like, to know that means that you can work towards that big vision that might be like this
Hmm.
one year, and then you can pivot and change and go in a different direction. And
Hmm.
I often find that I work with people who are multi-passionate, so their business isn't one thing. And
It's
that's
just not that little perfect box
no,
of
and
something
again,
that,
it's that idea that if I can't niche, then they're going to feel attracted to the fact that I can't
yeah,
niche. But, like that multi passionate of having like different things that you want to do, but what connects them,
then what brings it all
what
together?
brings them all together. Like, I think that as that unfolds for people, it is about gaining that deeper understanding of themselves and not
Hmm.
just the business, but they can bring that to the business that they create and communicate that the impact of all those different passions
Yeah.
much more effectively.
Well, I think we already see, and I think over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen much more of multi passionate, multi hyphen type careers because not only, and it doesn't surprise me that a lot of it is women because through
Yeah.
having children and different things happening in our lives that we're pushed into these areas. And one thing we're really good at as women is making it work. So we know that, like, and it's almost like we're saying, I'm not going to be pigeoned like that again, where my income only comes from one source. I'm going to make sure that I can look after myself and my family. So to do that, I'm going to make sure that I've got all these little things that, but like you say, bringing it all together. And I think that we're just going to see more of that. We're going to see more of people that do different things and have different, and even within their businesses. Like if somebody had said to me 19 months ago when I first said, right, that's it, I'm not going back to my career, my maternity leave's over, and I pretty much launched the business the next day because I was like, well, I'm meant to be going to work, so I'm going to go to work. My kids in nursery, so I launched the business. But if somebody had said to me then, well, you're going to want to start a community, and then you're going to, and I started the community like only after a couple of months. But if he'd said to me on that day, I wouldn't even believe that you're going to want a community, you're going to have a podcast, blogging and writing is going to be really important. So, I would have been like, no, that's not how I'm going to do my business at all. But it's all of these things because I know, even just from a marketing perspective, I need to have all of these different ways that people can find me and get to know me and
Mm.
relate to me and get to that know, like, trust, which I don't really like the like part in it. I don't think anyone ever asked a man, do your
No,
audience like you?
I
So
agree.
I'll do the know and the trust part. So yeah, so it's that thing that we're going to see more of that, and I think that's when the niching becomes difficult. But
Mm.
if people to bring that all together, and I've had clients, I'm like, but I don't even know how to bring these two things together, even if it's just two. And I'm like, the together is you. get to know you, but you're going to have to show up as a personal brand to bring these things together, because then your audience will understand. If you want to stay in the shadows, then yeah, you're going to have to treat them as two entities. But when you bring them together, and it's just really important to have these conversations, because I think to thrive, there's going to be lots of businesses that do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like, when I think about my children and the careers that they might have, that's absolutely how I see it. I don't see them as like going into a job on day one and still being there in 40 years' time. Like, they are going to change and grow depending on what is happening in the world. And I think we've learnt that kind of over the past couple of years, that nothing's a given.
No.
Anything can happen and change, and the people who thrive are the people who are responsive and able to kind of move with what comes their way, and like you say, make the best of it. And I think so many women, like when I again largely work with women, when I speak to them and they kind of talk about their why, they say that thing of like, oh, I want to be on the school run. I wanted to be on the school run, and school wouldn't, my job wouldn't let me
Mm-hmm.
finish at 3, or they wouldn't let me go to a couple of days. And I'm like, that's great, and that's like a real motivating factor, but there's got to be more to that as
Yeah.
well. And I think when you dive into that, that's when you really can see that you're doing more than just making it work. Like, it might feel when you begin like, oh, I've just got to make this work, but actually you're here to make a real impact.
Mm-hmm.
And the second you are really honest about what you desire that impact to be, your business is only ever going to get bigger. And if you can be that thing that stands for that impact and that, like, change in the world, it doesn't matter if that looks like writing a blog, or that looks like, making a product or whatever else. You, at the heart of it, are going to be able to drive that forward, and then
Mm-hmm.
all the other stuff can change and evolve. So
Mm-hmm.
whereas, like, once not being able to nail that niche felt really limiting for me, I almost see it as like freeing now, because
Yeah,
it means
your
that I can take
strength.
it in any direction I choose in the future, and that feels really good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if it feels good, that's then how you can show up. Because if you feel that you're limiting yourself, whether you are physically limiting yourself or mentally limiting yourself, I think it's then really difficult. Whereas I think when anything has gone well in my business, it's been the things that have felt good to me, and almost that I've not overthought. Obviously, I'm still trying to make sure I'm speaking to my dream client and doing all the foundational stuff, but not overthought it, not try to make it perfect. Not, and I've just been like, no, this feels really good. And if I'm excited to talk about it, like you said, if you're bored doing your content, how do you expect other people to feel? So, but if I'm excited about it, and I do find doing content quite boring, but I enjoy getting it out there because it's the thing that I enjoy talking about. So to me, like you said, it's just a vehicle, it's just a tool, and it's part of the bigger picture. So I don't give it any more power than I just need to get this done because it's just one of those things that's part of my marketing
Yeah,
strategy.
and I think, like, we're here to build businesses that we love, but that doesn't mean
Yeah.
there are going to be bits of it that are like, I mean, I'm not particularly lit up by doing accounts.
Yeah. Although I do love a spreadsheet. I'm a
Yeah,
marketing
don't get me
data girl.
wrong,
I love a
love
spreadsheet.
a spreadsheet.
But accounts, no.
But, like, that's not the bit that sets my soul on fire, but I know that that is a vital part of running
Running a
a
business.
business, but it also means that it's something you can outsource. And content's something you can outsource if you really hate
When you
it.
get to that point,
Yeah,
absolutely.
indeed. But it comes back to, again, like, knowing, like, what's my zone of genius and how can I do more of that? And when you're able to kind of own that without labeling it, then you kind of are free. You're free to do what you want.
And I think that what you said about the why and like women saying that, I want to pick my school kids up from the school kids, it's it's that it's empowering women to understand that they're allowed to ask for the things that they want. And yes, my children, of course, they're my why. They were the catalyst. I cannot sit here and say that I would have a business if I didn't have my children. I can't, because it was the 2 maternity leaves that brought me to do it. So I, even with hindsight, I can't say, oh, I would have done it anyway. that'd be really silly of me to
Yeah,
do
I
that.
definitely wouldn't have either.
Yeah, so it's that they were definitely the catalyst. And on the days where I am struggling, I have a picture of them on my desk and I'm like, seriously, crack yourself on. That's who you're doing it for. So my why in that context, but my why does also need to go deeper than that, because there has to be a reason why I do this business. There has to be a reason why I do this. This podcast has no impact on my children whatsoever. They get impacted from their mum being happy, from the money I can bring into the household, for the lifestyle that we can have.
Mm.
That's what they get impacted from. But they don't get impacted that I do a podcast. They're 4 and 2.5. They don't, they literally, probably in 5 years' time, they'll probably cringe that I've got
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah,
But and I'll have to deal with that then. But there has to be a reason why I do this. There has to be a why I do this particular business. And that why has to be about me or the impact that I want to have. And I think women are so scared to say, I have ambition, I have wants, I have needs, I have desires, and this is how I'm going to go about getting them. And I think, and obviously it's changing and everything, but you still see it fundamentally at the root, that we don't just want to say, and I'll include
yeah,
myself in it, a lot of work for me to say, no, I'm ambitious. I want money. I want my share. I want my slice of the pie. And you know what? I want my cake and I want to eat it too. That.
yeah. I think it's actually, it almost goes deeper than that, in that we're so tapped out of our own desires that if I was to sit and ask a room full of women who have not kind of done the work as
Yeah.
such and looked at it, like, it was a real turning point for me when it was my 40th birthday, and everyone was like, "Oh, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Do you want to have a party? Do you want to?" And no, 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 no. And then when nothing happened, I was like, "Oh, I'm annoyed," but like
Yeah.
I haven't actually been able to articulate what would have made me happy. And like I wrote basically like a mad dreams list after that, where everything from like teeny tiny little things to like massive insane things, like watch my son play at Wimbledon. I wrote a whole list of all the things that would actually bring me joy, that would make me happy. And that, even that, like, informs my why. So when I have to pack up at like 2:30 or whatever to go on the school run, and I'm sat at the side of a tennis court for fucking hours on end, and I'm like, oh my god, I could be, replying to emails, I could be doing this, I could be doing that. Like I can come back to the reasons why I do the things I do and what I want. Quite conscious of the fact I have just picked another one that was about my children, but there are other ones in
But
there
it's
as
not, no, but
well.
it is, but it's having that balance. It's reminding yourself why you do what you do. And one of the podcast episodes that's coming out shortly is with Jenna, and she had her children through IVF, and she then felt she knew something had to change in the way she was running her business, when she was like having to catch herself on, like she was picking her kids up, and I totally resonate, and I still have to do this with myself now, picking the kids up from nursery, right, go, 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 home, 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 dinner, right, pajamas, bed, so that you can crack on with working. She's like, I waited and tried so hard for 5 years to have these gorgeous little human beings that are now in my life, and now I'm trying to rush it because I'm trying to, she's like, something has to shift. And it wasn't her desires and her ambitions, they're now bigger than ever,
Yeah.
but she made sure that her business worked so she could be present with them and present with her business. And you have that choice. It's not easy, but you have that choice. And I have to, and it's like you say, but I want to be, like, part of my ambitions is I want to be that type of mum. Part of the reason for doing my business is I want to show up as a particular kind of mum and not shouty mum, although shouty mum did come out a lot this weekend. So, we'll see.
There's a
But,
place for that too.
but, and that's really, really important to me. But making sure I'm there for the school run is as important for me as the ambition of what I'm trying to do. And I can have both, but I just need to have that balance. And
Uh,
like I said, it's
yeah.
not doing all of the things now and
Yeah,
accepting that.
I was just about to say that timeline is so important, because we kind of, that's from looking sideways at how's everybody else done it. What's it like actually, like, to remember you are always in the right place at the right time for you,
Hmm.
is, again, it's kind of like freeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually what my solo podcast episode is about, patience, this morning. And next week is about consistency. So it's all about that. So it's all about trusting yourself and just kind of trusting the process. a little bit and being kind to yourself, because it is difficult. Now, as you know, I ask everybody on the podcast 3 questions all around joy and the joy in their life. So the first one is your joy spotlight, a favourite thing that has shaped your life, business, or work.
So I love art. And when I wrote said Mad Dreams list, one of the things that I realised like really gives me pleasure is painting. And it's that thing, like people obviously talk about flow a lot. It's the thing where I feel both grounded and connected and completely free. And I realised, again, off the back of writing said Mad Dreams list, that I kind of had stopped myself from painting because I was like, well, it's not your job. You don't do it properly for a living, and it's not going to be your job, and you don't want to build a business that is that. So just don't do it. And I kind of robbed myself of that pleasure for such a long
But
time.
what is that? Why do we do that? Why do we do that? There has to be an outcome. What,
Yeah.
or why can't the outcome just be pure joy? I like it. I enjoy it.
This links to question 2 because
Okay.
question 2 kind of give me exactly how question 2 is phrased. Sorry.
Question 2 is inspired by joy. So it's a book or
Yeah.
mentor that changed things for you.
Yeah, so I read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and that idea that you can find pleasure in the process and that you don't need kind of permission for creativity was one of the things that really allowed me to just paint for fun again. And I still probably don't do it as much as I should, but I basically built discipline around that pleasure to begin with, whereby I was like, every Friday you are going to paint, and I had to get really strict around that so that I could then kind of reconnect with the joy.
You have to make that space. And I have had to have people drum it into me about looking after myself and creating that space. And Claire Hill, who we both met through, she literally leaves me voicemails to remind me to drink water and also to make sure that I'm doing something for me. And she says, and if you message me back and tell me that you've done a workout this morning, we're going to fall out. And I'm like, right, okay. I said, but that is for me. She says, I know that's for you, but there can be other things too. And I'm like, okay, okay. And I now make sure that one of the things that having children the age that I do, and I've got one really not great sleeper, and I realised, it took me too long to realise, but I realised that stop trying to fix her sleep and just try and look after yourself a little bit better. So I'm looking after myself a little bit better. I make sure I go to bed by 10 o'clock. I make sure I drink enough water, Claire, if you're listening. And I make sure I read fiction
Yes.
in bed because I get into the habit of
Yeah.
reading personal development, business books, things that I enjoy. Make an hour for that during your day.
Yeah.
Don't take that to bed. And actually, what I then remembered, because like you, I did an English degree. I did not become a teacher out the
I
back
didn't
of it.
actually do an English degree, but that,
Okay.
that definitely is another story for another
Okay, well,
day.
yeah. I did an English degree. People expected that I would be an English teacher. That was never on the cards for me. I just loved books, was expected to go to university, so that's what I did. And I've always loved books, always loved stories, always loved, and actually doing that, I had a better sleep,
Yeah.
but I was more creative.
Yeah.
So in doing that, I remember writing my newsletter that goes out every week and writing saying, this whole newsletter is around something that I thought about by reading this book. I think it was the question of what's wrong with now. Like this character kept saying to everybody else, what's wrong with now? And the answer is always nothing. It's actually okay. And really bad things were happening in their lives. So I wrote this and I was like, had I not made space for that, that would never have. And also how that book then changed me and created space for me to think about things differently. Whereas sometimes we have this big stick that's like, no, with every hour that you have to be working. You have to be, and I was falling into that trap of being like, I need to work at night time. I've got babies. I don't work full time during the week. I need to work at night time. Well, only if you're going to do something productive, not if you're just going to sit with the laptop open and not actually do anything but say that you're working. So it's all these intentions. It's learning, like with the painting, that you're allowed to do something for doing its sake, for enjoying its sake. It doesn't need to have an outcome. but then the outcome is your pleasure.
Yeah, and in the same way as I kind of said earlier, like which part is running your business? Like which
Yeah.
part is running your life? If you're letting that kind of toxic productivity run your life, then you're going to feel miserable. If you're
Mm-hmm.
able to check in with it and go, oh God, I'm feeling that pull to go and send a million emails at 11 p.m. because then they'll be done and then I can rest. Like, get curious about why that is.
Yeah.
It isn't always easy to switch off and put yourself first, but by having that like conversation about why that is, you are going to come to a place where you find that acceptance. And like I say, like once upon a time, I would make myself do it every Friday. I don't do that now, but I definitely paint more than I ever did and get more pleasure from it. And like that's important. And I've often come, like people often say to me, oh, why don't you sell it, why don't you do it? Because I want it to be my pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've struggled with this with conversations I've had with people because my background is direct sales and marketing. So I'm always like, well, if you can make money out of it, why wouldn't you do it? Why? And they're like, because it takes the joy away from it.
Yeah,
And it's only getting slightly older that I'm like, I kind of know what they're talking about now. Not everything has to have that result. Whereas younger Diane would have just been like, it absolutely does,
yeah,
and she would have been like, I'll do it. You do it. I'll grow it for you. I'll do your sales, and it's just like, no, just let them enjoy it. Let them enjoy it. Now, you mentioned Big Magic, and I have probably read this book 5 times in a very small window of time. And I go back to it, it sits next to
yeah,
my bed.
yeah.
And I remember when you messaged me and said, do people
Very
say the
good.
same books? I don't want to be a basic bitch. And actually, I found this book through the Eat, Pray, Love, probably basic bitch way.
Okay,
That's how I found it.
that put me off reading it in the first place. I was like, oh,
Okay.
can I?
No, I found it. I'm a total rom-com girl. Like totally. There's certain elements of my personality that people get surprised at, and how much I love a rom-com, and Pride and Prejudice is, it knows no bounds. And how bad, like I can watch really bad Christmas movies. Anyway, like we completely digress. But that's how I found Big Magic. Now, obviously, Big Magic I think is a complete different book from Eat, Pray, Love. Is a complete different thing. And I do not think this podcast would be called The Joy Work Show if it wasn't for Big Magic. Because one of the bits in Big Magic is about the idea. And if you have the idea and it goes out into the world and you don't do something with it, somebody will. And she gives you very
Yeah,
specific examples of when this happened.
yeah,
So when I was launching the Joy Work Club, which is the community, and it sits in a Facebook group because the easiest place to host a community at this precise moment in time. And it didn't make any sense for my business. And in fact, the people I was working with at this point were just like, why are you doing this? To what end is this going to bring you clients in your business? Like, what? My business was like 8 weeks old, but I couldn't get it out of my head. Like I couldn't get, and it was the name. And I'm not one of these people. I always say to people, don't put too much onus on a name for your business. Don't put too, because it's got to be something that works and that people understand. And I just couldn't get like the Joy Work Club out of my head. So I literally one Wednesday morning decided I was going to do it and launched at 8 o'clock that night. Um, because and it was that thing, and Big Magic kept coming back to me and be like, if you don't do this, somebody else is going to do it. If you don't, and it was one of those things, I made sure I could go on and get the Facebook group, it was there. I made sure I could go on and get it on Instagram, and it was there. And I was like, the universe is telling me something. When do you get the name you want on Instagram these days? And
yeah,
it was just there. And I was like, okay, I just need to do this. And I did it. And the name was based off of another book, The Joy Luck Club.
yeah.
And that's where the name comes from. And then the Joy Work Show has been born out of that. So if it wasn't for Big Magic getting into my soul and that idea that if you don't do something, something else will do it. But I think you can take that both ways. You can have that thing of like, it's okay if you don't do the idea if it's a good one, because
Mm,
somebody else might do it and also might do it better
mm.
than you have it. But you also need to take action if you want to do it. It is such a good book.
Yeah, and I'm the same. Whenever like I feel kind of maybe creatively sort of stumped, I will go back to that book and all of a sudden I feel reconnected with what creativity means.
It's funny, I was just about to say it makes me feel that I'm allowed to be creative, because as somebody who did an English degree but never really took up writing or put anything, that there's little pockets of my life that I did, but never did took it seriously enough. Went into a private sector, money driven career. I was like,
Love a spreadsheet.
you love a spreadsheet, love data, love figures. Like I could sit and do figures and data, and that side of marketing fascinates me. But that's also creative, like to
Yes,
see how
I
you
agree.
can like change data and change outcomes based, I see is really creative. But it's allowing yourself to see that, and that book allowed me to think, I am creative. I'm allowed to be creative. I'm allowed to step into that space. I am not limited to what I have been. Like those things that I dreamt of as a little girl can happen in elements,
Yeah.
and that book allowed me to do that. So everybody go and buy that book, Big Magic by Elizabeth
Yeah.
Gilbert.
And like I say, I asked the question because that was my go-to in my head, but everybody I know.
Nobody's mentioned it on the podcast so far.
Okay,
Nobody has
that's good.
mentioned. I think, has it been more people? There's been a couple of books, but I think it's been more people at that point. But it depends what they've said in the Joyce spotlight. Some people have said people and then book. But yeah, as soon as I read that, I was like, oh my God, yes, I love that book, because it sits on my bedside table. I went to say nightstand. I went to go like all American and say nightstand there. I don't know where that came from. But yeah, bedside table, it sits there, because I'll just dip into it if I just feeling uncreative or that I'm not allowed to be creative. It just steps into that. And the last one is the joy killer, the thing that you think should be removed from the world. And I feel personally attacked by this one, but I do really want to talk about it. So let everyone know what your joy killer is.
So I think it's the teacher in me that I love to teach. And when I am like delivering a workshop or like in a classroom, and like I say, at the minute, I'm kind of craving a bit more teaching as well. So if I ever go to an event or a workshop, or like when I used to do CPD in school and somebody would deliver the session reading a PowerPoint, I would want to cry, and I still want to cry when I see that. And one of the reasons why, when we met at through Claire's session, that I loved it so much was that it was beautifully facilitated. And I think that if you are going to the trouble of going to learn something new or to kind of like invest in yourself by going to some kind of training, and you are given something where there is that real lack of human connection, like it just robs any joy of it for me.
Yeah, I totally get it. And the reason I'm going to caveat me saying that I feel personally attacked, that it's not as deep as it's not as deep. I am good at presenting. I would host a wonderful event. I definitely get a human connection, but I'm really aware in the online space that when I'm creating because I have a membership and I'm creating the coaching within the membership, and I'll do a coaching where we do have a presentation, because some people need visuals and to see things and that type of thing. I am so aware of like, am I kind of nudging into that territory? Because I hate that type of presentation as well. Like I totally switch off, but I'm like, am I nudging into that territory? There's only so many things you can do over Zoom, but
Yeah.
am I nudging into that territory? But I try and break it up, and then I'll get them to all come together and chat again. So there's lots of things that you can do. But when I read this, I was like, this is like my biggest fear, that I do something and people are just like, oh my God, bore off.
Well, then it's probably a lesson too. It's probably like that moment has invited you to kind of get curious about what that is.
Yeah, I'm going to review my I don't use PowerPoint, I use Canva. Is that any better?
I mean, I think the fact that I've name checked PowerPoint speaks of my age, if nothing else.
No, but I think if anyone's going to take anything from it, it is that thing of just think about the engagement you want
It's
from,
the human connection.
it's
Yeah.
that human connection, and it's that kind of, and definitely from an event, there's no reason why in person somebody has to do that. But yeah, it's just interesting, because I'm so conscious when I'm doing something over Zoom that I'm like, I need the slides. I turn into the wee person in the corner.
Yeah.
How do I keep everybody engaged? And I hope my members who are listening to this are laughing, because they're well aware of like how I feel about it. And
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because obviously, like you say, you are limited in an online space, and I've actually been doing some coaching recently with somebody who's helped me to do that. Like, how do I bring my big personality
Into the TV
through
box.
through the camera? And yeah, like, that's something that matters so much to me. That
Hmm.
again, like an area that I've invested in because I want to be able to kind of transcend that in an online space and
Yeah.
create that human connection because I'm really passionate about learning, and I think when we use the tools we have available to us to their full potential, then we can do incredible things. But when we just go for that,
I think it's just when you go for the norm or for what's easy or what's been done. I think if you start to question, and I think like me, I think if you worry before you go into presentation that you're going to bore people, then I think you don't
no,
because you're already concerned. It's like when people say going back to being a mum, when people say, "Oh, I don't know if I'm a good mum," and people like the fact that you're asking that question in the first place means that you probably are.
you're
You
gonna,
know, so I think it's if you're just like, oh, I've done a PowerPoint, it's fine, it'll be absolutely right. I'm just going to read off the slides and it's going to be fine. That kind of attitude is the type of person you'll be just be like, I couldn't even remember what you said because I
yeah,
fell asleep with my eyes open whilst I was, but it's that fine line when you're delivering online between do people want 20-minute type coachings? Do they want an hour to an hour and a half to feel that they've got value and they can ask questions and you can get engaged? When you're doing like the online things, particularly in memberships and webinars and those types of things. But generally, it's just best to ask the people what they want and see what
yeah,
the best blend that
yeah.
you can go for.
And I think like I'm just going to end like totally bigging myself up now, but I feel like you'll be okay with
Oh,
that.
I
One of
will.
the things that makes me really good at what I do is being able to read the room
Yeah.
and work that. And I think like that is a unique skill. I like I am very proud of the fact that when I connect with people when I'm teaching them, to go back to that, like if I was in the room with somebody for 30 seconds, what would I give them? I feel like I'm able to do that. And like ultimately, it's that impact we want to make in the lives of other people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if people want to know more about you, know more how to not do a boring presentation to people, where do they come and find you?
So I am an Instagram girly, and I exist in some other places, but come find me on Instagram. I am at Rebecca L. Cracknell, and I don't have a website because I burnt it to the ground when I was feeling very, very boxed in. So that's where you're going to find me.
Amazing. The links will be in the show notes for everybody that wants to just go and click and go. And I don't let anybody go, Rebecca, without asking them a final question, which is what joy legacy do you want to leave behind?
So I think the legacy I want to leave behind links to that idea of people having permission to live to their full potential and to find out what that is, to fuck about and fuck it up, and to really know that they can want a life that is like rich and full and fulfilling in the best possible way.
And on that beautiful note, I will leave it. Thank you so much for coming on today. It has been a blast.
Yeah.
That conversation with Rebecca was one of those conversations, as are so many on this podcast, that could have gone on for hours. There were so many topics that we could have gone so much deeper into that we wanted to continue to talk about. And we may have even carried on talking a little bit after we finished actually recording. So I hope you got a lot from it. As always, I like to do my top 3 takeaways from the conversations that I have. So, for my conversation with Rebecca, it was that your transferable skills are gold. It has often been a thought of mine of why there are so many teachers, ex-forces, public sector workers who come into the online space and thrive. What is it that they have? And it is these transferable skills that they have to hone so expertly in their sectors. But it's also what stops a lot of people making the jump because they don't believe that their transferable skills are value when actually, when you look at them, whether you're coming from teaching, corporate, or another industry entirely, Your past experiences hold so much value for any business. Recognizing them, seeing the value in them can give you the confidence to step fully into whatever you want the rest of your life to look like. If it is entrepreneurship, there is so much transferability there. Secondly, the authenticity wins every time. Again, Rebecca, sorry, I'm using that word again, but being yourself, showing up as yourself, learning who yourself is wins every time. Trying to mold yourself into what you think people want never works. The more you show up as you, the stronger your connections and your business becomes. And actually, you are the uniqueness in your business. It's a thought that I've always had, and it's a belief that I still have strongly. But it was lovely to have a conversation with somebody who had that exact same belief and is owning the fact that they are not going to niche. Balance isn't about doing it all. It's about boundaries. Whether it's setting limits with work, social media, the types of clients we want to work with, or even ambition, knowing when to say no is just as important as knowing when to say yes. And actually, when we know who those dream clients are, who we want to work with, who we want to bring into our world, and who we believe we can take them on the transformation, that is when boundaries are really, really important. If this episode resonated with you at all, I would like for you to like and share it with somebody that you think would love to hear Rebecca's story. And as always, I would love you to go and subscribe and share it and like it, because every time that you do, it gets us out there to more business owners, to more people who want to bring more joy into their lives. And if you want to have a little bit more joy and strategy in your business, if you want to think about your strategy a little bit differently in a small implementable way for 21 days, go to the show notes and click on the link for the 21-day strategy sprint, where you can get it for just £21. A really easy way to work for me. It's really impactful, and there's business owners out there getting some fantastic results. Until next time, stay bold, trust yourself, and keep building a business that feels right for you, for yourself. Keep finding the joy.